Hello everyone, today we talk about the concept of the certainty of victory. On this channel we talk about military history, so we often enforce an assertive dialectic to give substantial confidence and boost morale and say that objectively, yes, there is a truth out there, and that even if we can't reach it because of our poor cognitive means, we can, however, point at the right direction and come closer to it. And there is all space in between in which we can't really achieve great things. Today, I don't want to break that rule, but I would like to focus on an aspect that has to do with actually an important set, if not the whole human experience in a way, whether you consider the strictly military aspect of it, that, as you know, we can't fundamentally detach from the political or the social one, and especially from the first one, in terms of what's the objective of war. And this is what we'll concentrate naturally, predictably at least, today. But it is also a matter of broader motivation and wondering what is also, just from a historical point of view or from a linguistical point of view, that we intend for victory. Right? We will make multiple videos on victory and the concept of victory, as well as the concept of defeat. That is also much overlooked. These are all, if you want, cultural. There are many cultural perspectives on this, and every people, every culture, but every perspective, every individual has somewhat a different idea of what this is. And I find it astonishingly fascinating to observe how much people's opinions sometimes change, even within fairly cohesive human group, or how much our understanding of such things ranges or differs, as a matter of fact. So, the concept of victory, as we have seen in the Clausewitzian videos, is the basis of all strategic reasoning. Yet it is also the one that, more than any other, in fact, seems to assume an ungraspable protean, almost, consistency. If you read the 16th century Italian humanist Francesco Guicciardini, it is in many ways considered, like, also in historical perspective, the consequence, or the step forward, in a not necessarily in a positive sense, but at least from a literary point of view, actually, yes. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a great thinker, and but he was living in a phase of disenchantment, right? Machiavelli was writing during essentially the beginning, or at least when the Italian wars were still happening, in the hit of it. Guicciardini was documenting in many ways the fact that the peninsula had been largely now lost its own autonomy, and was reflecting, generally speaking, in a more concrete, right, less ideal, even less theoretical, perhaps up to a certain point at least, view of what in that sense politics and war have to be about. There is a bitter feeling, a sense of pessimism in a way, and Guicciardini surely didn't lack experience and disenchantment himself towards war, and he was able, so this is always said, to be amazed when he saw an old man, a good harvest, and a won war. Think about this. Think about it in the 16th century, not just in the fact of the won war, but in comparison, an old man or a good harvest in the 16th century objectively was one of the most radically traumatic centuries in the history of the West, in spite we attach to it kind of the Renaissance, but it was objectively, from those who lived into it, the sense of loss and and terror, and mostly because of the Reformation, but also of this broader expansion of the horizons in a way where there seemed to lack a center, unity, that had been the paradigm instead of the first centuries. And yes, I mean, it was not it was an achievement to become an old man at a time, or even to have a good harvest. It is something you really also work hard for. And a won war. right? Events, all these three together, that were both empirically experienced, because they existed, all three of them, and also influenced by such a series of both intentional and casual factors as to appear to us rationally inscrutable. Right? In the Renaissance, there was this realization in the broader field of political as well as military theorization that there was a certain amount of what what eventually happens as an outcome that is achieved by man, right? As there is a humanistic principle in it, but here it's also the broader religious idea. Think about the concept of grace, over which the Europeans were slaughtering each other at that point. And or how much can you do? What are deeds worth fundamentally for salvation? And there is another 50% where this is in the view that instead it's fortune in a way. We can't even say God in the sense that God encompasses both. There is a few, and this is the whole debate, in fact, on the issue of grace and free will and so on, but it's fundamentally this asymptotic view towards the limit for which, yes, you can't do your best as a human being, but you will achieve just that 50%, which is not 50% plus 1. That is not decisive. That is, you can do whatever you can, but you will never alone make it. Right? And this is a very important realization for a time in which indeed massive tragedies were going on, and it's both if you want an optimistic and pessimistic take on reality at the same time, because you never know whether it's true or not, and this is, if you want, also philosophically speaking, a possibilistic take on the issue, because you do not fully know what happens in between those halves. And this is a very good example, in my opinion, to start from, because the human experience of war is, in fact, intrinsically chaotic, and can only suggest an idea of potentially equally chaotic victory. Right? A misleading suggestion, because historical experience, on the other hand, does not record victories and defeats as events merely dictated by chance. Right? History is written, is done properly. And we need a narrative to explain what we got to at that point. And of course, we need concepts as victory and defeat. Not that these, we'll not discuss this today, whether this doesn't mean whether they exist or not, but that's properly the point. That is, what is that we call these things like and what for, even just from a theoretical point of view. Then the experience of reality tells us what a victory and defeat is. It's not that, our cognitive, let's say, categories are maybe not entirely managing to see the boundaries of such definitions when applied to reality. And more sometimes, because this is not so simply, immediate, right? You can't immediately say what is it, where is a victory, where is defeat. And that's where the Clausewitzian paradigm will come to be useful. And you would actually be surprised to know that not even von Clausewitz, by offering plausibly the best answers ever being given, is actually brings to the full conclusion of it in his own work, for reasons that now we cannot properly explain. But there is even in there, in my opinion, a lesson to be learned into the constant need of researching properly what things like victory or defeat are, but especially in especially in understanding before action what is that you really want, and it is up to you. And we know how much von Clausewitz is on this line, and that is the one of individual responsibility, and that is what eventually, as an aim, defines the political and ultimately the military objective. So we do need, however, to use a narrative. So we need to stress that certain stories ended in a certain way, right? It's even, which is definitely easier than, for example, starting to tell the story from a certain point, right? It's probably one of the single most difficult things when you talk about war in order to explain it, even if it's just a specific campaign or battle. What is the beginning of that? Because properly, you should be able to, if you really want to get to the truth, but it's obviously impossible, as we said at the beginning. But you still have to start somewhere for the sake of practicality. So all of this process is approximate in many ways, and as the whole human experience is, and this can be absolutely traced back to methodological to the scientific method in a way. It's not that we are meant to know the truth scientifically. Science, thankfully, has nothing to do with that, because if that was the case, there wouldn't be any accomplishment, probably, concretely speaking. That's the parallelism I intended to trace. Now, in ancient times, the difficulty of unequivocally identifying victory was dissolved in the expedient of formalizing the processes that led to a, let's say, victorious war, right? With methods that oscillated fearfully between a total abandonment to the divine will, and therefore to chance. And don't think in the Renaissance they were so distant from that in that sense, and they were actually recovering many classical principles in that regard, or to the diametrically opposite affirmation of a legal certification, which is a kind of formalistic approach, which invested war at important levels, especially the more war was ritualized, in a sense. You can draw that back to, a single duel challenge, or to things that concretely in war have never actually determined alone the outcome of thing, because it doesn't matter how how simple the society is, but there are still always non-deterministic reasons for which eventually the outcome of war is the one that it is, right? So there was a bit, in fact, the illusion of certifying something on a legalistic almost base that was naturally all one with religion in a way, and this all continued for a long time. I don't think that even in today's times we're that far from it, that the ways we approach certain topics of international politics or war or everything concerning it, and historically, socially, etc., are not, sometimes do not meet with a kind of a religious attitude in the most neutral sense of the word. That can be negative or positive depending on the situations, but essentially for a reason that has not much to do with objectivity per se, but rather for the aim that you subjectively have that may be actually the winning one, right? And that is probably actually what makes the thing done in at some level in relative terms, and that is exactly what has made certain people, certain countries historically winning over others sometimes, or also going to blindly to their own defeat, if not annihilation. Because humans do work like this, right? Not just like this. Actually, it's way more complicated, and this is exactly what, in a way, was already understood in the ancient world, hence the need of recurring to certain frames, certain interpretations. For example, let's look at ancient Greece. Nike was a messenger of victory on behalf of the gods, right? It was literally the winged victory that descended from the heavens and on humans as a divine blessing. And a messenger, not a custodian, right? It wasn't Nike to do the thing. It was just a mean, right? And the winged Nike, with agile ankles, that, as it was said at the time, that the Athenians worried about its volatility. Hence the iconography of it tried to stop forever with them by depriving it of wings in the statue of the temple by Nike Apteron. That is a quite fascinating view. That is to say, you can even gain victory on the field, right? From that, if you want still regulated warfare that existed between the Atlantic city-states at the time. But that thing will fly away. It won't stay like that. And in here, the realization of that limit, the realization that a victory alone is not a definitive thing, that we made a video on the most obvious realization that, however, we do not like to be reminded that much, that nobody is invincible, that we are all vulnerable, that you can accomplish something and being proud of it, but that's not over yet, and it will never be over. And that therefore doesn't matter how glorious you are, how much you can achieve, how strong you feel, etc. You can and you will turn into ashes at a certain point. And that's something that makes you understand how existentially meaningful it is, how much the concept of victory has been, in this sense, also not surprisingly associated to a divine principle, right? Victory doesn't belong to man. It's a divine gift for qualities that man can have. Hence, think about still the Renaissance idea of the 50-50. But that's still not enough, right? Doesn't matter how great you are. And that's a hell of a realization from human societies, right? That's something that you find actually very early in time. It's definitely a prehistorical concept. And because it's the most obvious realization, you should listen to that. Because if you ever thought otherwise, I mean, not necessarily that you are invincible, but maybe that there is a shortcut, an easy way, or a positive way, or you for which you can be fairly sure that in certain conditions you will make it, well, then definitely should be acquainted to reality, and especially the harshest ones, the ones that, not surprisingly, have most of the times to do with war, but not only, but with conflict altogether, and with the realization that when you're under pressure, when danger is approaching, there is a specific reason why that those probabilities are there, and they mostly derive from the fact that we still do not understand a freaking damn what the hell is going on in our existence. But we still have to find ways to cope with that, and some do work, but they're not definitive by definition, because otherwise we wouldn't have the problem in the first place. Similarly to the wingless Nike, that actually has wings and can't be cut, as we've just said, the agonistic war between the Atlantic city-states that at that point was considered, in fact, in simple terms compared to what broader, just as surrounding people's thought life, for example. Or think also of the recourse to because that was a very sheltered context, politically, socially speaking. But think about the recourse to the ordeal, or the medieval use of the sessio triduana, which forced those who wanted to prove themselves victorious to stay 3 days on the field after the battle. Think about, I don't know, the Swiss in 1476 after Grandson, right? And these all were attempt. The ordeal, as we've seen, also the recurring to match, always descending from Grandson is already a naturally secularized reality, but the ordeal is all that, right? It's a pretty actually unjust way to say, okay, let's just make chance essentially, or certain other parameters that nothing to do, basically what the problem is, decide, because otherwise we can't do it, and that's a social regulation for which simply collectivity says, cut it off with this stuff, otherwise this conflict will tear us apart, and therefore it's better to live in an unjust society than to making the feud going on, right? And that also makes you understand why such things happen in tribal societies, whereas in kind of civil states that things function in a bit of a different way. But that's exactly because of tribe risks to be wiped out from a day to another all the time, and the political unity and the social unity, cohesion at that point is truly what matters, aside from what the individuals can count. And that also tells you how brutal and what the cost of life was actually in those societies. But that's a functional thing. I mean, for their context, it worked, right? That's just in when things get more complex and there are more resources and there are more capabilities, more people make it forced to solve problems in a more articulated and sophisticated and ultimately effective way for that specific context as well. And in relative terms, it doesn't even necessarily work better. It's just that in absolute terms, it achieves more because this society is more developed, and therefore the sheer amount of problem solved is, however, good altogether. And, well, all these were like staying on the, as we've seen on the day of battle after victory for 3 days, were attempts to reduce this unsustainable uncertainty of victory, united by the single purpose of conferring universally verifiable objectivity to the outcomes of a battle and a war at the end of the day, especially considering, as we've seen also from the von Krieger how much single armies and therefore the victories between, the outcome of battles between such were basically what all war was about, very differently from what it would start becoming since the 18th and 19th century. But it was rendered necessary, even in there. It's a bit like the ordeal. It's like proving this formality for the sake of saying, okay, well, let's recognize that. When we made this summer the video on the Battle of Toro between the Castilians and the Portuguese, well, that was fascinating because it was a battle that resulted essentially in a draw, or even maybe the Castilians got it even slightly worse. But for example, in that sense, the outcome of that battle, and that's also a Clausewitzian concept, was exploited so skillfully from the Castilians from a political point of view that at the end of the day, that became a Portuguese defeat. And it brought eventually, as you know, even to the union of Castile and Aragon and all that major world-changing event. The consequences of battle are very important. We discussed them in the von Krieger, as we were saying before, and they have to do specifically even in there, not with the formality of the battle in itself, which is a proof of what we're saying right now, that is to say, you can't even take the field. Not that, I mean, that's exactly what at Toro happened. But what happened in that context, as far as the connections with politics and society, and not just the military, are concerned, can, however, destroy you, right? Even after having won a battle, right? Think about the famous Pyrrhic victory and all the strategic consequences that a battle can have. The negative ones that it can have, even if you actually won the tactical engagement. Well, this is exactly, once again, another of those desperate shouts. That is to say, we fear because we don't even know. We have shed blood, we have killed and being killed, but we still don't know what will happen, because that's not how easy you can solve a matter, right? This is very important to understand at the root of wars, historically speaking. That is to say, it's never been enough. Right, there's never been a war that's been won because a guy challenged another to duel, because of formalism brought to one thing or another. It could have even worked. It could have definitely influenced the whole thing. It could have even been decisive at one point, but it could have not been the thing in itself hadn't there been a context that pushed other forces, overwhelming ones, from a direction rather than to another. Right. And always think about this not just in cultural terms, but why such peoples, for example, would recur to those formalities, even though that those wouldn't work, as we've just said, in the way we mean. But specifically, let's say, without even recurring to the rationalistic explanation of why they, whether they actually understood why they did it for, but specifically whether it worked or not, and how functional it was for that society. And you would be surprised to know that it did. That these gestures were properly not in vain, right? It was a specific use that otherwise would have not been there. It didn't always work either, right? But at the same time, it stemmed from this is better than nothing, in spite of all the difficulties that. And don't think that today we have much better ways of defining exactly what a victory is or not. In fact, modernity itself has compromised the possibility of resorting to to means of this kind, right? But has not been able to offer better solutions either, right? That is to say, we can't solve matters between states by challenging to single combat, even though do not think it's certain show-offs from individual political figures, etc., are not meant to do that, as we did it in since prehistoric times. Nor we have come up with an actual solution to the problem of the certainty of victory. On the contrary, this seems to have become a moment where you can really twist many narratives much more easily than it was possible to do in the past. It's as if in the past, in relative terms, we had been much more wired to the actual practical meaning of certain military, to certain, battles or wars outcomes, because actually we were much more into the thing directly, right? Which doesn't mean that it was better before. It's, as we were saying, in absolute terms, in quantitative terms, it's better today. The capacity we have also to analyze these things, that at a certain time, it's exactly the complexity of our system today that didn't exist at that point, that raise much greater problems of interpretation, and can, which is a positive thing, right? Because it shows us that even if there is more to know, that there is, after all, a possibility to make order, at least theoretically speaking, into this picture, to come up with a complex idea of how even, in fact, more complex scenarios work. Just we have ever less of a pattern to applicate to all situations, and that's the challenge, and that's why we should challenge constantly ourselves to that effort, because it's basically, like it was for us in the past, the only way to actually know what the concrete difference really was. And when you study military history, you start realizing what this is about after you got into battle after battle or campaign after campaign, because you start sensing that, let's say, the formality of a phrase, of a name, of a number, of an opinion is just that, and that there is something more to what actually happened in reality, because history is not fairy tales. History is based on historical evidence, that is historical reality, wherever you want to, which is not the truth, but it's still historical reality, and therefore it comes from something that happened for real, right? So you cannot be that. I don't want to express so much insecurity regarding our, positive capacity of understanding war or history, but exactly for this reason, it takes to be very firm and very concrete and experienced and skilled, and not just to pretend that something is as you wish just because you have some bias for which you feel the need for it to be like that. This is the beauty of history, that history doesn't basically history teaches you to teach yourself, right? And you have the brutal reality in front of your eyes, and you can't do anything with that, which is very different from coping with a person that has a different opinion from you. But this, we are entering also in another field, maybe we'll discuss another time. So coming back to the modern reality of war, the risks, for explaining what we were saying before, the risks, the costs, and pains of a war make not only a defeat, but also an uncertain conclusion highly undesirable, right? Because after all, I think after the tragedy, the unspeakable atrocities of the 20th century, we have grown, I think, pretty much cynical at the end of the day. I mean, we have at least gone into the realization that killing 100,000 people in strategic bombardment is not necessarily worse than killing 100,000 people because of an economical policy. I don't know, that you block the export of some product, or maybe causing indirectly 100,000 death because you do not intervene into a country that is committing genocide, for example, on a people or on another. So the problem with this now is that we began to calculate, coldly these ciphers and outcomes. The problem we have today is the predictability of this, right? We're not much scared after all, and this is actually not a positive thing either, whether we will lose or not, because actually victory and defeat have enormous consequences in the ways they are perceived and what they're gonna make, like, the consequences they're gonna bring in the future for even future wars and so on. And this has had devastating impact, especially in the kind of more emotional West, in a sense, at least for how we have been turning on certain issues. I wish we were all that cynical and realistic when taking into consideration certain things, which has nothing to do with not caring about lives. On the contrary, is exactly understanding how important they are and being objective about them, even in front of tragedies that surely have an emotional impact. But specifically, we are puzzled by the fact that will we make it or not? That is to say, even when the outcome has been out there, the question is, was this a victory? Was this a defeat? Right? And certain answers are not that easy to give sometimes, right? Because once again, it's not a question of searching for a military answer, but rather for a political one. That is, what the hell was that military doing in the first place for the most obvious thing for which they were there? That is, someone sent them, and that is the responsibility for what it's done. It's all political, right? There's not a single thing that war does wrong. It's exclusively politics that uses war and does positive as negative things throughout the military instrument, but that's essentially a political problem. And this is something we have to learn to understand the very hard way. And this, as we have repeated many times, has absolutely nothing to say blaming the politicians and not the soldiers. This has absolutely nothing to do with that. Every soldier is a political being. There is not the classist social distinction. It has absolutely nothing to do with that or populistic ideas. It's absolutely zero. Right, is actually the denial of any historical reality, and it's not surprising that actually such ideas have such widespread consensus, meet with such widespread consensus, even in societies like ours that are supposed to be developed also from a mental point of view. One of the consequences is that if force must occasionally be used, concord is unanimous on the need to win, right? Because otherwise, what are you doing it for the first time? And that's exactly the aim that we have to search for. That is, why is this happening in the first place? Hence, the need not to be satisfied with determining how to win, but to take a further step back and identify the victory in itself, to fix the thought on the concept of what one wants to win, right? To obtain from the fields of battle that victory that would allow the complete realization of the political objectives of the war in order to mature that war result which advances the achievement of the political aims of the war. Right? This is von Clausewitz. Okay? This is realizing that you are there for a freaking damn reason. Right? It's not that you're there by chance because you wanted to go on vacation somewhere and you find yourself with a rifle in your hand killing people. That is to realize that you are part of a political community, of a social community that is doing that for reasons that every single person should understand. I mean, if you are our citizen and not a subject, and this is a very punching thing I'm saying, actually, if you contextualize it to certain realities, you should know why you have a rifle in your hand and you're shooting at people. In a war, in a statal war, let's call it in this way, but also in any other kind of situation for that matter. Even if you're attacked that is, making a robbery or something, like there is always, and it's likely actually that that thief that criminal will actually have a much more straightforward realization of what he's doing that for, right? It's dramatically simpler, right? I give you that. Understanding why wars that last 20 years are fought, it's not easy at all, and it's not that every person can understand, right? And especially that robber, especially is not necessarily more understanding of what that practically means, unless he's provided with a pretty solid education and structural and based evidence of what we're talking about in here. That's why, unfortunately, not all of us, and that's why I often said we can't be defined equally on the same civil status at the same point, or at least to have certain specific, to be allowed to do certain specific things. We tell people that, until they come of a certain age, they can't do this, they can't do that, but here we are also making people vote that have absolutely no idea that there is even a connection between politics and war in the Clausewitzian sense, and fundamentally do not give a damn or think that they're detached or think that has nothing to do with the whole thing, or that they're born in a country. Yes, they may be born in as we all are, in a country or another by chance, but the question is you're still born there, and therefore whatever happens you can't ignore it, but reality doesn't give a damn about it. And especially doesn't give a damn about you. This is something we should teach children since a very early age. That reality doesn't give a freaking damn about anyone. Doesn't matter who you are, right? And you're not born special. You have to earn that with your deeds. And that is something that exactly makes the difference also in situations like warfare. Because that's not something you want to be engaged in without understanding why it happens. This is naturally way more important for those who wage it than those who actually are sent there forcibly, as many people are, or they find themselves randomly into it, right? Because never think that wherever you live, that from a day to another, some hostile knocks at your door with a rifle, right? Doesn't matter which is a global superpower, or just one of those robbers we were saying before. You have to know that such things exist, and you should know, hopefully, to cope with them, which is not a granting that you will make it, alive, that you will actually win the thing, but at least you should be aware of the potential of it. And naturally, living in contexts that are objectively privileged not to experience such things on a regular basis, we have to admit, looking at history, that these things are much more easier, much easier to happen, much likely to likely to happen than we think. This is why we study war, right? Not because we like doing it, but because one day, God forbid, we may get it to one, and at that point, you at least wanna know what the hell you have to do. Military doctrine has often devoted itself to practical manuals. This is a great problem also in the history of military theory. This is a habit already begun with the Romans, which somehow ignored or took for granted the definition of victory. Right? It's just a how to do, and not specifically why to do, or why is that people do. Right? Because it's not that I can't teach you what is your motivation. We all have a different reason for which we do things. Well, we should first of all understand why is that humans do what they do in the first place. Well, this is normal. Military theory ignored this for millennia, right? And it's not surprising, because part of the reason those manuals were written is that actually they had a few to do with the and that's how we trick ourselves also into thinking that now we have necessarily a better understanding on certain things altogether, because those manuals were written in realities where people knew how to make war independently from manuals that were written for reasons that sometimes were just they were definitely not some divertissement, but they were surely something way less connected wired with the military reality and the practice of war than they actually were. The same goes for many historians that we take as people that actually had an expertise on military matters, and that fundamentally they didn't. And it's also fairly easy to understand from the things that they wrote. For its part, strategic political thinking, with a few, however significant exceptions, has failed to define the hierarchies between an objective and the means to obtain it, and at times has not even been able to clearly indicate the objectives themselves, trusting to receive any victory as long as it is useful, which can be spent on profitable post-war negotiations. The struggle of the war, as von Clausewitz says, it's like in business. It's like a negotiation in itself, right? It has to do with the economy of it in many ways. And if you just think that you can, as we were saying before, get into a war by mistake and then coping with it at the point, you have already lost a consistent chances of winning that war. It's difficult to find historically a political social reality was ready for a war, right? I mean, look at World War II, the most devastating war in the history of mankind. No country was prepared to war, not even remotely, by 1939, right? Some countries would never actually get there. The Germans arrived to that in 1942, where they basically had already lost the war. So the question here is to realize exactly the deep connections between war and what causes it, and as we've seen, the political and social background, but also especially what that war has broken out for, right? Because that's not even something weird that happened for no reason, in the sense that nobody took the decision, right? It's not a random, like it's, I don't know, there's a comet that passes every once in a while, nobody can do anything about it. It's literally that someone started it because it has a specific reason, a hell of a reason if it started a war for doing it. Independently from whether it's a good or bad reason, that doesn't even matter, because it doesn't help us to determine how to stop that person in that country if it's doing that. We just know how to defeat him. Or to help them, depending on where side you are. So it's also very irresponsible to pretend in the first place that even just through historical explanations that a war had to be fought. at all costs. That it had come to that, right? Yes, there are situations in which objectively it's like a wall against another wall, and you don't find any breakthrough, and then violence flares because there is seemingly no other option left. But that's not true either, right? That there is always another option, which also is not necessarily a better one than war, right? It's just war most of the times is not a good idea, or at least it could be avoided, or at least there could be some other thing that comes to modify the current situation at a point. There could be other more convenient solutions. At times, instead, rare times, war is actually a good solution. And altogether, let's say that war is usually the quickest solution, not the best solution at most times. Sometimes it can be different, but it's a minority of the times. We could say more, but the thing of the objective here is important. I mean, focusing on why people fight, right? Because, understanding what's an enemy objective is actually something not just political, but also specifically military, strategical value, right? If you have to fight at war, you have to know it. And you cannot make a strategical plan without realizing what's the motivation behind that is political, right? I could make tons of examples of this, but let's simply focus on, let's highlight the positive aim that exists in here. And let's absolutely erase from our minds that wars are fought for pointless reasons, for negative reasons, in the sense of what you actually want to accomplish, that it's just a barbaric thing that somebody didn't think through because it's just primordial instinct. No, war is completely the other thing, the other way around. And it is important to know it, because otherwise, even if wars were fought just by evil people, you would know that at least what you have to know what their aim is, right? And whoever fights a war has an aim, because every human being that does something has an aim, and that aim is, in order to go to something like a war where you can putting everything at stake. In societies all together, so it's not just the folly of a single individual, right? And ever discard any historical interpretation of that kind, are ever more positive reasons. That is to say, are reasons that are evidently ever more, let's say, convenient for that actor, whichever their motivations behind them are, right? Can be on a resolution to stop a genocide, or can be say, genocide perpetrators behind that. The problem is you have to know, if you're fighting that war, what are the two guys doing? Because if you do not do not know the thing, you cannot solve it militarily speaking. And if it has already began, you don't have many choices. I mean, there are other choices there as well, from which also disasters can occur, because some genocides actually took place, and eventually brought to wars of reparation for that. I mean, for stopping that, because the international community was too lenient to understand, too forgetful, and too stupid at the end of the day to understand how the situation really was on the ground. We could add so much more to this, because I understand I'm actually thinking of very specific examples, but also I don't want to throw those in because, because war is politics at the same time, and it doesn't matter here, really, to understand the concept, right? The problem, as we've seen, however, here, is that in 2020, and for a long time, I fear, we will still be missing an attention on this issue. That is, understanding what the hell the connection between the hierarchies and the objectives and the means to obtain them are. Right? Of course, politics knows this. The military knows this. Society, so, and it's normal in Clausewitzian terms, because it's supposed to be like that. The problem is that there is no broader awareness right? Because if you pick politics altogether, it's normally in these situations there are just a few people that actually know what the business is, and that is recognized by others, and they're let down, right? But don't think that even politics, and not even the military, on average, as average individuals, actually understand much of this stuff. They do not, right? And that tells you how dangerous it can get, right? How many mistakes were possible, historically speaking, just from a, you know, practical point of view. Mistakes that brought to world wars. Here, that's exactly how it happened both times, right? Properly miscalculations, and that has nothing to do with the evil of it, right? Because there are scenarios in which things could have gone very differently, but the problem there was specifically the lack of understanding of reality altogether, right? It's not, fortunately, it doesn't take just to be very evil to accomplish. You need competence, which is something that, yes, surely must be derived for a great moral force, moral resources that are asked and put in the field, and that's how, unfortunately, every war is fought. I mean, all the wars that could be avoided, let's say, were fought like any other. But the question is that it's much easier to be motivated than to be intelligent or to know how to do the thing, right? That's why in war, normally, it's the more intelligent, not the stronger, who wins. Von Clausewitz's admonition in the Kampfkriege that, quote, the political aim, the primary reason for war, will therefore give the measure both of the objective that the war action must achieve and of the efforts that are necessary for it, stop quote, has not been extended to its extreme consequences nor completely metabolized even by von Clausewitz himself. That's another issue we should discuss, of course, how the single most important work on war has ever been written in the history of mankind, as we were saying at the beginning of the video, does not take fully into consideration this broader link, because naturally it's concerned with this political with the political bond by definition, but at the same time it's telling you how to fight a war. Is not giving you reasons or motivation. It's not coming out of that. It's just stating how the thing works, and then the question is, good luck to those who want to understand in the diversity of every single human situation what's going to be like. But it's an enormous field of application for future studies if one just wanted to look into it. It's just that it conflicts with certain, I would call them moral paradigms, moralistic if anything, paradigms that we still own to simply, let's be honest, in a society that is still too backwards. Like, we have not reached that level of collective education and intelligence and understanding that is necessary to have a public talk about this in serious terms, right? Nobody cares. Look at what politics is today. Look at which is not, again, it's not, the politicians are just the pure reflection of what their people are. And is there anything like this? It's just formal. It's empty, right? We've not gotten to that point. And these things should not be ideas discussed by some elite person, right? It thinks is able to change the world. This stuff should be taught to children ever since they start to know the world, together with history, together with geography, together with languages, because it's probably the soundest and some of the most empowering and responsibilizing concepts you can find there. It's scary, actually, but it's exactly there that it gives you the clear measure of the risk and how important it is to take these aspects into consideration, because they're part of our everyday life, even if we don't want to see it like that, right? It's very easy to turn away and pretend that things do not exist, but they still exist. And yes, they do have an impact on you. Doesn't matter where you live in the world, it does, because you're part of it. And it's not a moral statement, it's a real statement. It's a historical statement, it's a scientific statement, right? On the one hand, if we look at the, as we've seen, this broader fader to take on this topic, to extend it, to spread it, to inform, we can say that this is justified by the fact that the difference in roles between politicians and the military has often resulted in a mutual self-referentiality and in an inability to communicate that has greatly compromised the development of strategic thinking. This is absolutely true, right? I could make easily an example from the place I come from, but this is actually present in every single country in the world, right? I can't think of a very few countries maybe that have a very close, but I don't think even a country like Switzerland actually has thoroughly a relation between the politics and the military in the same way, because society is involved. The societies are not that good altogether wherever you go. They can be better or worse, but at the same time no country has ever achieved this, historically speaking, and we are very far to achieve this in the first place. Yeah, but as we were saying before, but this realization can at least help us understanding why sometimes this happens, right? To the fact that, for example, why all certain prejudices towards politics, why all those prejudices towards the military, right? And why sometimes how many prejudices also from these sides towards society altogether? Because objectively we do not talk among each other. It's difficult, right? It's not easy. Don't think that, I don't know, a military historian has it easy to discuss these things with a politician or even with a military man. Actually, we have arrived to a point in history which military historians understand war better than the military does, right? That it has nothing to do with the fact that historians, it's not that they can't wage war being capable. The military is the best and can by far and by no mean. But as far as that connection between politics, war, the objective of the war, that is not something so clearly, that there is no bridge between this specific spheres most of the time. There is no dialogue, right? There is no common background. In spite of being part of one country, the same polity, of the same people, right? And this is very dangerous because also historically speaking, think about all the coups that the military did sometimes to back certain, wicked political regimes or, other things that, however, were not beneficial to the people altogether. Well, these things happen too. And there is always an inherent tension. Think about the anti-war movements. Well, those, as you know, I don't like much because I believe that pacifism is as bad as militarism to solve problems in the world. But in a way, it's almost natural that there is a divide between, the military and the civilian environment, in that there must be a concrete effort from both sides to come together if we want to have a real dialogue, right? It's not one side or the other. It's objectively that, I don't know, if you're a doctor, I don't know anything about what you do, basically. I can't think it, but it's full of mistakes, of misunderstandings, and you teach me about medicine, right? But that is a great thing if you can do it. And the same goes for any other profession. I think that in this sense, there should be naturally a much greater dialogue between the military and here specifically let's talk about military historians. I had the fortune actually last year uh, to speak at a conference with a discussant that has been a military man and has been teaching actually into military academies, and he's a medievalist like me actually, and that was very fascinating because we had a very interesting talk also about the the civilian. I mean, yeah, the military historians in the civilian field, how that is perceived, etc. At levels that were very very in fact wired to our field. Actually, we were medievalists even with the same period in common, um, and that made me understand a lot. As you know, I've seen what the military is about. Certain levels of talk to officers have been given orders. I've confronted with them in an environment that was their own, and it was beautiful, honestly. And I've had this opportunity there to even realize from the voice of the same military man and an historian that yes, the military has a completely different mindset, and that is true. That we should change that. We should change our own mindset as civilians and the military mindset as military men. As far as this incapacity of talking is about, and believe me, it does exist. This is not a matter of saying having let's say a political religiosity and thinking that as we all should, that our service women and men in the military are doing an outstanding job, and we should support them and we should learn a lot from them. I've seen what they do, and that has changed my life forever. Every day I wake up in the morning, I often think about it, and I say, think of what you can do for those people who do that job in your stead, by the way, for defending you, and you should do your part for them too. And that is a very important starting point, because there are certain people who just say, I don't give a fuck about my state, about the flag, about these people, about the military man, all these wicked politicians and wicked wars, and that's not an intelligent standpoint, because it's not a positive standpoint. It doesn't bring you anywhere. You would be the first to be wiped out where there the disgrace of a war breaking out where you live, because you have no idea what a sense of cohesion, of responsibility, of duty is, right? And that's why we're so flat and soft at this point, because we are just nothing. We don't know what it means. We confuse so much at these levels. We do not know the difference between war, and conflict. We do not know what violence is and how it should be framed into a vision of the world. We do not know that there have people who have come before us and that have explained these things to us, and that they are part of our own same environment in a way, and we kind of regressed, or at least the way the average person is today. It's surely what still has a lot to learn from people, some certain great minds of 200, 300 years from now, that actually told us certain things we should listen to very, very carefully, and that nobody gives a damn, right? So I personally believe that that's why I talk about war. If a person asks me why is that war is so important to you, it's because if it is not important to you, you miss a huge part of even knowing how to defend the people you love, even just through the awareness, the sheer awareness of what we're talking about. And it encompasses every aspect of our life, even civilian one. The war is not for the military in the broader sense. War is unfortunately about everybody. We all have our own wars every day. It's just on a smaller scale. Never forget what von Clausewitz says about the duel. War being just duel on a large scale. It's exactly the same thing. It doesn't change. The essential is that one. And if you can understand how it works, or having a clear idea of it in the first place, you can surely do much better as an individual in your everyday life. And which will bring to less bloodshed, to less violence actually being exercised, because most of the times this happens is unfortunately for reasons that are not worth it, right? And we do not know, this is the point of today's video, is that in all this we will never know how worth it's been, right? It's easier to see how unworthy it was at certain levels, especially when you are the one that is hit the hardest, and that we can all understand. For those people that, I don't know, think what it means to be to grow old in a country at war. That is something that I don't wish anybody, but I could go as far as that, saying that very dear people I know did, and that is something which it's difficult even to address in the first place. These are devastating things for someone's mind. And it's not even just about having seen someone killed or having been under bombardment or having starved. This has to do with just, even if you're not directly affected in that way, but having been part of a country where that has happened. And appreciating evaluating, say better, the outcome of a war, independently from which side it is does change a lot on the base of such a standpoint. That's why learning more about war can make you be more objective and actually solving your and other people's problem altogether, for essentially for us to live in a better world where we do not need to recur, where conflicts are diminished, right? We cannot eliminate conflict from human nature. It's impossible. It's our DNA. We're built like that, right? Nature is built like that. It's not a philosophical take. It's exactly what evolution tells us. It's what science, what biology tells us. It's there. We are that. We are defined by conflict. We wouldn't exist as a human species if conflict hadn't existed. And human societies in the past have always been aware of this. What do you think the Golden Age? What do you think the Garden of Eden is? Right? It's the ideal that never existed, from which we had to eventually that we had to destroy, to a traumatic event to explain why we are in the condition we are, which is a permanent one, at least as far as our earthly journey is concerned. You understand how far this can go, it can reach, because it can encompass literally everything you believe or think at this point, right? But the point I was making relatively to the dialogue between politics and military, that however is the most, I'm not sure whether it's actually the most important, but as far as the development of strategic thinking especially it's surely the priority one, right? Then surely the people together should know, as we have said, too, and should be part of the thing. And it's always actually a bit like that, right? It's not that these things are separated, but the point is that we could make dramatically better as communities about this. But it's the uncommunicability between politics and war translates itself into strategic failures. And even in here you can easily understand, even in recent history, what this is being about, right? It's properly an incapacity, a miscalculation. You don't have to throw evil in to explain it necessarily. That can be, but that doesn't tell you how practically certain things are done, right? Or better, they can, right? It can, because an ideology can influence naturally the way what you do and defines the objective you want to reach. But still, the military works its own way, right? The art of war is something that doesn't change excessively on the base of that, or even if it does, at least in recent, I mean, look at the history of last 200 years, let's say, where these concepts were brought on the floor. I mean, more or less the world has homogenized on the Clausewitzian standards. That's pretty much it. Still, of course, Wars have been fought in very different ways, and it's the same Clausewitzian theory that explains to us that, of course, there is a deep connection between even a specific political ideology and the army that the country that has it is going to field. But at the same time, we're talking about a how to do, which is not a political philosophy on the field. It's literally you have to kill the freaking enemy, and that has its own specific functions that humans always knew how to do, even before writing about military theory, at least in a realistic sense. On the other hand, more simply, it should not be forgotten that for centuries, victory was the distinction between survival and total expulsion from history. This is what we were saying before too. So you have to realize that if we have such misunderstandings today, it's also because we, fortunately for us, do not make war on the scale. At least as far as in relative terms to our societies are concerned, we used to do them in the past. So it's obvious that there can't be an understanding about things you're not even supposed to know at a certain moment. You're not necessarily going to know simply by living into a society. But the idea that, as we were saying before, you're always a step from annihilation. Well, that's something that humans had learned the hard way to get us to the point we are now. And that's why we should treasure that so much. The reasons why it was believed like that. Right? Whole nations disappeared at the sunset of the day of battle. Think about Genghis Khan stating, quote, that the greatest happiness is to disperse your enemies, to chase them in front of you, to steal their riches, to see their loved ones drowned in tears, to tighten their hearts to your chest, their wives and daughters. That's what we're talking about. This was the everyday historical reality of the world up to not so much time ago. And do not think that such things do not exist in this very moment, right? But that gives you a pretty good measure of what that can bring also in other historical moments with different means, which means that perhaps we do not even perceive, right, how much can be achieved after all. Still close to that in ways that would outrage ourselves otherwise we were under sunlight, and that instead we basically let ourselves being subject to through means that just do not look scary as this, but that fundamentally are, and that cause much, of those same results in practice. And it's obvious that if we reason like Genghis Khan, in these conditions, the spaces for ambiguity are scarce, and any discussion appears irrelevant. You literally raze to the ground the freaking people. You exterminate the males. You take the women for you. You burn to the ground everything you find. Well, yeah, I mean that there. Well, you're maybe certain you have accomplished something in terms of victory, but it wasn't easy, not even at that point. And today, right, assuming things had ever been simple, which is not the case historically speaking, well, they got even more complicated, way more complicated, right? That's what we should be cautious about, because that's a strategic space of operation. The simple realization that there is such complexity or there is not. It's the same reason why, I don't know, fake news can have a devastating effect, even if especially a certain approach to it is to laugh about such things. There is a very few to laugh about. And there are many more spaces to cause that, as we were saying before, than before, possibly. At least there is less moral. Let's say there is less motivation for such things to happen. For finding the equivalent of what Genghis Khan wanted to do to his enemies, but still, it would be much easier in relative terms to defeat us in that way. That those peoples that resisted to the Mongol invasions actually failed. Indeed, over time, doubts about the possibility of victory, its opportunity, and its decisiveness have been added to the endogenous uncertainty about the definition and identification of victory. Right? That is essentially about its very existence in nature. What is the certainty of victory? How can you be sure that a victory is going to be obtained, that you're decisively compelling the enemy to fulfill your will, and how all what is going on around whatever this is all happening is going to make the things stay like that at least for a while. It's not easy, because once again, this is not an isolated reality. Even just during the war itself, right? This is not a problem that you can postpone to when war is over, because the problem is happening while we're fighting the same war. You're not certain about the outcome, right? Because otherwise you would not even need to fight it. Things would settle by themselves for that ratio of strength. And these doubts, as you understand, are partly they're surely motivated. In part, they're justified. In part, they can turn into a real weakness. These doubts also, and however, more importantly, have not affected in our times the wars in the least, right? Which wars have continued to undaunted to inflame the continents. We could make videos about also more contemporary war, forgotten wars that cause millions of dead. Nobody actually gives a damn. But that is, if you want, the terrifying beauty of military history, that when you go to study it, you realize that in spite of all these changes, this objective improvement in civilization, we have not solved the problem. Let's not discuss whether it's even possible to, or how by which margin we could, but let's simply realize that the way we advance in civilization has not reduced at all our destructive capabilities, at all. And it's normal. If you're more civilized, you're more destructive, in potential at least. There is no doubt about this. There is no comparison you could ever make with simpler political and social realities, because you simply have more, and you can. And that more has taught you how to deal with more complex systems and to develop a higher intelligence. And that's what civilization is. And this is already something extremely difficult for many people to understand, because they prefer the simpler way, not understanding it's the losing one, that they maybe stick to that just because they're already defeated. And that doesn't help them to be better people. So if this expresses this condition about war expresses a definitive judgment on the validity of certain arguments, it does not, however, subtract anything from the influence they have exercised, for example, in public opinion and political strategies, as well as on the existential character that many conflicts still have. Right? Wars are never easy to understand. There's not a logic that brings you to the simple realization and say, well, but after all, I understood why that happened. My compliments, right? I thought that in order to be an expert on a certain reality, you have to be, to study history for a lifetime, and just specifically the history of that specific war. Instead, as we were saying at the beginning, it's much easier to have that simple narrative that tells you, yeah, the thing happened because of that point, end of the story. I don't need to any better insight to that. That doesn't help, because knowing more from a historical point of view literally makes you a better military mind, because it makes you a better political mind. Right? Once again, not everybody's meant to to understand this, because we need people that know how to do many other things too, to live in a better world. But I presume the connection between these these aspects is like something you cannot simply confine into a field like military history or strategic analysis, political studies, or these things. This should be a universal good, right? As we were saying, we should teach the essentials of it, at least as a general, at least from a dialectical point of view, since since a tender age in school. That would spare us from so much. I think just by that we would earn easily billions altogether, just because of all the inconvenience that derive daily from not having that, right? It could be a dramatic field of investment. The the point I was making, though, is also properly the difficulty that exists in defining a victory. It's not even necessarily saying, okay, whether this was a victory or not. I mean, that starts from a general standpoint that you can easily find. I mean, there's no need to discuss why, I don't know, the Allies won World War II. I mean, there are not many other ways to put that, right? But the question is understanding how complicated the whole question. Just think about the theme of the Cold War that began in the same World War II, if not before, because even in there, what is that we're talking about is all intertwined, and therefore it's mostly from this perspective that you start reflecting on. But wait a second, but then World War II has also multiple meanings. Yes, it has, which has not to do with deflecting the idea of who won or who lost, but on the contrary, but to define it in an ever more consistent way and with very specific lines as much as is possible, and in this sense understanding also the broader connections with other aspects, right? But there are certain wars that objectively are not easy to understand at all, especially if you come from a background that of course knows nothing about this. Right, I don't know how many of you ever gotten interested, I don't know, in the war in Congo, for example, or in the wars in the former Yugoslavia, right? Because those are pretty big things, but objectively, they're, I mean, the way that they're perceived just in popular culture, it's just people do not give a damn. And instead, the world we live in is heavily defined by such things, and as you can understand all the possible reasons to stand behind it. They're mostly political, right? But they're also historical and cultural and educational. And once again, that proves how encompassing this problem is relatively to the say the civil experience of the civil life of a person. Hmm? That's why we need to talk about certain things at that point. Because things are always more complicated also what they seem. So of course, yes, I think historians should be deputed to being able to explain things in simple terms, because as far as they can, meaning that it's obvious that very complex and complicated things cannot have a simple explanation by themselves. But there should be someone that comes to you and says, I can tell you fundamentally what's the deal. In my opinion, as far as I can provide you the evidence with this and make you reflect what I personally got to that point, which has not been easy at all, and I have still doubts about, and that's what a honest historian would tell you. But it's still better than knowing nothing, just having a prejudice, because it fits some of your whatever the motivations for those are. So in a conflict, those who conceive of victory, this is also another very important conceptual step. In a conflict, those who conceive of victory have a substantial advantage over an opponent who does not have a clear vision of their own interest, or defines their victory exclusively as a negation of the opponent's. This has to do much also with having the initiative, right? Here we could digress beautifully on the concept of attack and defense and the positive negative object in war. The point is that those who are, this is what it's usually the case, is that those who have a clear idea of their own interests is also because often it's the ones that have more or less, let's say they have more to win, to earn, or to win or lose from it, and that therefore are more motivated. And many times they are, well, there is let's say a positivity, as you understand, also in the let's say in the active sense of how that war will be waged, whether it will be waged or not, because naturally, as we were saying before, conflict is not war. But these conflicts must be resolved, or at least if they are still there, that tells you sometimes how important they, or more or less important they are, let's say. But this has to do also with the concept of initiative, right? It's obvious that if I fight against you for my own reason, that at that point is evidently stronger, and your response is just preventing me from achieving that objective, and you do not have specifically any other motivational factor on your own, well, chances are that my objective is actually stronger than yours. This depends naturally on many things. It's not always true, because just think about how even a same objective can be more or less important to a person, just for matters of all the interests involved broadly meant. How what for a small power can be vital for, well, as far as a big power is worth nothing. And at that point, you understand how complicated it gets to define the value, even not just the certainty, but the value of a victory or a defeat. Because war is as a metric, right? There are principles of reciprocity, but still, the question is, everybody sees the things their own way, right? Even if the two things are intertwined at all times. So having a motivation, a clarity of vision regarding what you want and what is at stake, what are your interests, what is that you want to do. In other ways, what has more determination is more likely to accomplish more, right? In war. And no army, however strong it may be, can win a war when the political aims it is instrumental in are unrealistic or the result of erroneous analysis. This tells you how much the military instrument is subordinated to politics, which is completely, right? The mechanicistic idea of war being a matter of technical problems. Those people who think that they're smart because they bring on the fore the concept of logistics, that is, it's more important rather than tactics, and unfortunately logistics does not belong to the theory of the art of war. And also there's something that encompasses it by far, at a practical level, that is strategy, that is way freaking beyond logistics. And no, wars are not won because of logistics. Once again, it's the tip of the iceberg and can be decisive, but it's not what war is by itself altogether. It's something dramatically more complex and broader, right? And if people, if our problem is, I don't win war with armies, but with logistics, right? Yeah, then we would have solved all the world problems, right? And evidently, it's not the case. So when you hear these things, this kind of, I don't even know how to say that, formulate this new term, competentistic sounding, approach to the thing. I don't know how, I like to phrase things very sometimes very clumsily too. But I don't like to, and I don't think I do, because willingly I don't want to sound like, I don't think I sound uh, competent in the sense that I want to stress that what I say is the real thing, in this positivistic approach. That is, you do that, it's that's how you do. No, here the point is always leaving you with the understanding that there is a very few things you can achieve for sure, right? And that the only way you can do something positive about it is trying and learning how to do the thing by yourself, because most of the times nobody can teach you how to do it. And even though we need to teach a lot of things without which we couldn't even start to presume we can get those results, still there is always a component. Getting more competent doesn't mean to get more necessarily more certain about the result, right? That's where responsibility kicks in. That's where there's not the magic formula or press a button and the problem is solved. No, because the greater the thing is, the more difficult it becomes. And once again, there's no golden section. There is no passepartout to these problems. You have to spend a lifetime of getting that experience and trying your best. It's not even, maybe it's not in, you're not even going to succeed. And history teaches you how this happens all the freaking time. Because every time there is somebody who is defeated, that's basically it. And it's not just about, passing an exam or whatever. This is entire countries got war to be destroyed. And you can understand how much commitment was behind that, and how likely it is that if they did that, it's because they thought they could make it in a way or another, but they still failed, right? And not because they were stupid, or you would be more capable than them, because most likely we do not know anything about it, what it even means, but simply because this world of ours is very, very difficult to understand. Which again doesn't mean that we cannot understand it. As far as the practical, the positive achievement can be reached, can be, at least be at hand at a certain point, within our reach at least. So concluding, I think that defining victory thus becomes an indispensable investment, both in understanding the nature of modern conflicts and in governing them, right? And last but not least, to win them, right? Which is what can really make the difference, right? It can be decisive as far as you, even in here, the tip of the iceberg can be, but it can't be because it informs, a clarity of vision informs a lot of things of what you're doing. It's like, in relative terms, the best investment you can make when planning a war, and yet again, by itself it's not gonna be enough, because you have to be enough motivated, which is also one with that. But it's something different. You have to have the resources to do it, right? But you would be surprised by how much can be achieved, even with a few means, when there is a valid capacity, right? And especially where there is also disorder and division from the other side. I could say more, because these are all very almost moving concepts to me, because when I talk about these things, I have in my mind all these flashes. That's also why I stop every once in a while, because I think of all things I've read, seen, and I wonder, you really see the face of the real face of history there, and you understand how crucial these topics are, because what you see there, it's real. There are people who have been exterminated, they've been destroyed, their memory washed away, right? So again, this is almost a phenomenological approach, because it doesn't tell you anything still of why it happened, but still it makes you consider what can be the the actual reason, and what are the ways to which these reasons pass and influence such outcomes, right? And I think starting from this, and the connection between the understanding of your objectives and the motivation for them, and the connection between your will and violence, that is the same one between politics and the military, is a big part of the wall, right? And we're also excluding society, but it's altogether still the one who's going to suffer, sometimes even the most, from all of this. And therefore, you understand, it never ends. We could go on forever saying this in cycle, finding other ways, other examples, other formulas, and that's why I'm making Schwerpunkt in the first place. And I have no intention to stop, because it's evidently a worthy topic to discuss, right? It's never enough to stress how important such ideas are. However, for now we stop it here. I just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it, otherwise leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. And for now, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time, and see you next time. Bye.